Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast. With your hosts, Ashley and Michael, please sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast presented by the Undroppables, sponsored by Analyst Depot. I'm your host, Ashley. This is our other host, Michael Duncan. How are you?
I'm sad, Ashley. I'm really sad
I
that the
know.
Raiders and the Chargers couldn't give us the one thing that I asked for.
We almost had it. We were there, and I said to you before, Brandon Staley galaxy brained himself out of a playoff spot, at least according to the Raiders.
I mean, I've
true it
seen
is, but
it's been very varied reports. Like some people are saying that the Raiders it probably wasn't the timeout. It was probably the fact that they couldn't stop Josh Jacobs from running and getting a first down. Like that's probably why. But it just makes me angry and I want to blame someone. And I think more than anything, I'm just angry I have to watch Ben Roethlisberger play another football game.
That's the craziest part of it, is that now the Steelers are in the playoffs because of it, because they didn't tie. And as much as I was physically pained by there not being a tie to get two teams in the playoffs, I absolutely love that game. And I think it was probably game of the year and best game the NFL had in a really long time.
Probably since that Chiefs-Rams game, I think.
Yeah, I know which one.
It was that was incredible. This game obviously wasn't as shot for shot as that game, but the last half of this game was just incredible. I mean, it was just it was absolutely ridiculous. It was so fun to watch. Justin Herbert is just I think I'm more angry about that than anything. I just want to watch Justin Herbert play football more. I don't get a lot of Chargers games, so my viewing of him has been limited.
They kept putting him in fourth down positions and they kept going for it. And he kept being clutch every single time. He converted nearly all of them when they mattered most. It was insanely impressive. His stat line was really good. And that game, that will be a game that it felt like a blowout in the first half. Not a blowout, but it felt like it was over, right? It was a boring game. It really wasn't anything going on. I mean, it was good football, but boring, and it felt like it was over, almost like you might want to turn it off a little bit early. And then you just didn't, because it turned into an absolutely amazing football game. And I'm happy we got to watch it. Sad that we didn't have a tie.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It just would have been beautiful. It would have just, it's all I ever wanted. When I was watching the Colts lose to the Jaguars, I was thrilled. I was so excited for Sunday Night Football. So, it's unfortunate.
You said it. You brought up a couple of stats, and I texted it to you that my boyfriend was like, "Wow, Duncan's really smart for bringing that stuff up. He kind of called this one." And then the Colts got embarrassed on national television, and they actually put out a statement today. I'm not going to read it, but the owner, I believe it was the owner, was like, it's not the way we wanted it to end. Our team, after going 0-3, knew it was an uphill battle, and this is not the way this team should have ended. It was kind of embarrassing. And we're going to figure out what's going wrong and what to do better.
Yeah. I mean, I won't say that I'm actually that smart. I just spent enough time on Twitter to see these facts. But I did kind of have a weird feeling that Jacksonville would win, and maybe it's the Philly that's still left in Carson Wentz that led to that.
A little bit.
But man, I mean, a couple weeks ago, Indy felt like the team that no one wanted to play in the playoffs. I mean, they were they were hot. And now they're not in the playoffs, and it's great for the Eagles. I mean, we get a higher first round pick, so I'm fine with it.
I know.
But
it was a storyline. It was a story that you would have loved to see the Colts there. This team was fun. As much as it's a Carson Wentz led team, it was a fun team. They were fun to watch these handful of recent weeks leading up until this game at Jacksonville. So I'm sad they're not in it, but you get a better draft pick, so I'm sure you're happy.
I'm thrilled.
I did see a comment from Tommy that said, "I got glasses. I've always had glasses. I just never wear them, and we're gonna have to deal with the glare for one day." But Yeah, all right, we could jump into it. We are now that we talked about our favorite game of the week, we have our playoff seating set. We're gonna the Edith
That's about
glasses,
1,000% worse,
the
actually.
Edith
The
glasses. I
Edith
love them.
glasses. Even
I
dead, I'm
love
the
them.
hero. Yeah, no, that was a really bad glare, so I'm not going to do that for the sake of everyone. If not my own ADD.
Yeah, that you wouldn't be able to stop looking at it.
No, I'd be watching our podcast on my glasses.
Yes. Anyway, our playoff seedings are set. That's something we're going to talk about to close out our show. We're going to talk about some key vacancies for head coaches and GMs. And we are going to talk about injury reports. Our injury report is a little bit different this time. We're going to talk about ones that are just impactful going forward for playoffs. So we didn't have any quarterback injuries for playoff teams. 2 running backs from the Arizona Cardinals were injured this week. Running back James Conner left the game early with a rib injury. He's considered day-to-day, and Cliff Kingsbury said that they will test out his injury tomorrow, Thursday. And Jonathan Ward exited early with a knee injury. For wide receivers, Marquez Valdes-Scantling from the Green Bay Packers left early with a back injury in the first half. He's been dealing with this back injury for a few weeks from what I can tell from beat reporters, but it doesn't seem too serious. It kind of seems like one of those nagging injuries. Tight end Tyree Jackson from the Philadelphia Eagles suffered a torn ACL.
Yeah, I mean, it's of little consequence when it comes to the playoffs, but he's a former quarterback who's kind of being converted into playing that tight end. He's hyper athletic. He's very big. He was a really fun offseason story that didn't really amount to much in the regular season because of another injury that cut a season in half, basically. And it's just a shame because now more than anything, he's going to miss out on some valuable offseason reps and stuff like that. But really shouldn't affect the Eagles when it comes to the playoffs.
Yep, and that was a non-contact injury after catch, you said, correct?
Yeah.
All right. And for our defense, special teams, O-line, we're going to go through them a little bit quickly, but we have a decent amount. Christian Barmore, defensive tackle from the New England Patriots, suffered a knee injury. He was actually carted off the field. There was major concern that it was an ACL or MCL, but the MRI showed no major damage, which is huge for the Patriots rookie. Isaiah Wynn, an offensive lineman from the Patriots, left the game early with an ankle injury. The Patriots are what word am I trying to say? The Patriots know what it's like to lose a couple offensive linemen. They were out without an entire offensive line at one point throughout the season, so I don't think that's anything that's going to be too impactful. Kelvin Beachum, an offensive lineman from the Cardinals, exited early with a back injury. Vernon Hargraves, the cornerback from the Bengals, had an ankle injury. Jaquiski Tart, safety from the Niners, suffered a groin injury pretty late in the game. Jameel Dean, cornerback from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, injured his hamstring. I don't really have an update yet on if it's anything serious, at least not that I saw, but he had a hamstring injury. He left the game early. And I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name, but Mitch, the punter from the 49ers, got a concussion during the game. So, yeah. You don't really see punters getting...
I think it's Wishnowski.
Wishnowski.
I think of all of them, that doesn't seem that hard to pronounce.
Yeah, it doesn't. But when I was like going through it fast, it seemed like it was like it seemed harder. I kind of glazed over it. But you don't see punters getting hurt too often. You'll see kickers get more hurt than punters will.
I believe you. Can't say I've really done the research. Maybe that's an off-season article for Jose. Kickers versus punters. What's the more dangerous position?
The people are asking us to live pick our startup. Do you want to do that?
I mean, I'm already looking. Okay. So, I guess for anyone that isn't me or Ashley, we're in a startup currently with a bunch of patrons from our Patreon at the Undroppables for a Dynasty Fantasy Football League. Me and Ashley are co-managing a team. And so we are in the 6th round. Yes. Who are you thinking about taking, Ashley, in the 6th round?
All right. So what I'm going to do first is I'll give you our team so far. We have Justin Herbert in the first. Oh, we're picking out of the 5 spot. We got Justin Herbert in the first, Mac Jones in the second. It is super flex. We got T. Higgins and Mark Andrews in the 4th and Michael Pittman in the 6th. We traded back in the 5th.
Yeah, we've traded back a couple times now.
We have.
So someone that is there, I'm going to try and just talk through this process so it's not horribly boring. But Brandon Ayuk is there. He's a guy that we were talking about beforehand.
Yep.
This is a PPR and start 3 wide receivers. Obviously, we don't have any running backs yet. Available is Leonard Fournette, Miles Sanders, Michael Carter, A.J. Dillon are probably the top ones available. I'd assume we probably don't want to go tight end. And some other also Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And some other wide receivers that are available are Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Hollywood Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Thomas. What do you think? Where's your heart leaning?
I'm getting nervous that we don't have a running back. When's our pick after this? We have a long time before our next pick, so I don't.
No, it's actually not that long. I mean, it's only the 7-6 because we traded back later.
Oh, okay.
Earlier on. So we actually have 2 picks next round. So
I would say I would probably go with either Leonard Fournette or Brandon Ayuk would probably be my top 2.
With that in mind, I am going to say Brandon Ayuk because I would rather go with the young wide receiver than the older-ish running back. So,
and one of the things we've been talking about is that our team is super young. So while a lot of our picks so far have been people who can help you in a win now league, that our team is kind of more in a rebuild, that we're looking for these young guys that give us more upside in the long run. So I'm totally comfortable with going with Ayuk.
All right. He is drafted. We have Yep. Okay. Now he's drafted. We have live picks. So everyone in the comments can shut up and leave us alone. And we can proceed on with our show. And that brings us to the coaching carousel. Black Monday has occurred and a little bit of Black Tuesday, I guess.
Yeah.
When it comes to one team in particular. The Giants have fired Joe Judge and their GM Dave Gettleman has retired. Live pick again. We don't have another pick. I don't think. No. The Vikings have fired Mike Zimmer and their GM Rick Spielman. The Broncos have fired their head coach Vic Fangio. The Dolphins have fired their head coach Brian Flores.
Surprisingly.
Yes, that one was a bit shocking. And then the Chicago Bears fired both their head coach and their GM in Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. A little less surprising. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, do you want to start with the Giants, end with the Giants, talk about some of these other guys? How do you want to do this?
We can start with the Giants. Yeah, so Dave Gettleman was quote unquote retired. He retired? He was kind of forced out in a way, but they let him retire, which is kind of a little bit of a giving him the credit he doesn't deserve. But yeah, so they got rid of him. We knew this was coming for a long, long time. Probably about halfway into the season was right when everyone kind of knew that their mind was made up. But of course, it's the Giants, so nobody 100% believed that. And so I believe it was Adam Schefter came out with a report right around Christmas time. You and I spoke about that on our last show, that he was definitely retiring. And the news on Joe Judge was flip-floppy the entirety of like the last 2 weeks. So reports came out that Joe Judge was going to be fired. Well, not fired, but that Joe Judge was kind of in a hot seat after the season ended, that they didn't kind of know how they were going to proceed. And it's those type of people that you want to listen to what they're going to say. And they said that maybe he's not going to stay. And then they decided he was going to stay. He was allowed back in the building. He talked to players. And then yesterday at around 5:00, Joe Judge was fired. 4:00, Joe Judge was officially fired as head coach of the Giants. I think the big thing for me is it's super surprising that I didn't really expect them to, like, as much as they 100% should have. I don't think I had any expectations that the Giants were going to fire him. I think what it comes down to is that they are looking for a good GM. They're putting out a wide net for GM right now, and I'm proud of that because that's not something that they really did last time. So they're putting out a wide net with these guys that are well-established guys from really good organizations who probably are not going to put up with Joe Judge. And I genuinely think Joe Judge talked himself out of a job the last 2 weeks and played himself out of a job in the last week. I'd argue
he talked himself out of a job for the past 2 years, but that's
he did. But the last 2 weeks literally felt like it was like a sketch from The Office, that with some of the stuff that he was saying. I don't understand what it felt like comedy that I don't know if he felt so comfortable that he wasn't going to get fired, so he was just acting silly, but I don't know. And then that game on Sunday was genuine. So many people in the football world said that is the worst game they've watched, like worst performance by a team they've watched in their careers or in the last handful of years. I mean, the Giants QB sneaked on a 3rd and 9
from their own
yeah. And Aaron Rodgers ended up saying something about that he was like, Matt LaFleur called that play and like that shit's not gonna fly if you say that to me. So yeah, that's what happened. I'm happy to see him go. I think he was dealt a bad hand. And I know I'm going on a little bit here, but I genuinely think Joe Judge was dealt a bad hand. Do I think he's an absolutely horrible coach? Not really. I think he could be a good coach as a coordinator. I think he's proved himself in that right. I don't think Joe Judge is ever going to get a head coaching job again. But yeah, I think he was dealt a bad hand and he wasn't kind of given all of the tools to succeed. But nonetheless, you should be able to put out some better performance than what you have these last 2 years. And I'm just hoping that this franchise does what they say they're going to do. The owners, Chris Mara, had an interview today in which he said that they wish in their last head coach and GM search that they had casted a wider net and kind of took their time on the search rather than filling the vacancies as soon as possible. So I'm hoping they follow through on that. One big thing to note is that they said the next head coach and GM are going to be the ones to decide the future on Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend too much more time on this because I know we spent time on it last week and you got to talk about it for a few minutes. I'm just going to be plain and simple. I think Joe Judge is kind of a moron that's way too full of himself. I think he came from Bill Belichick and had a bunch of Super Bowl rings. I don't honestly know how many rings he has, but I think that he thought that he was the shit and everyone should just bow down to him because he came from that Patriots organization. And clearly that didn't work. It doesn't seem like anyone ever respected him, regardless of who was calling to come back and take less money. But yeah, I think he's just a complete and total moron. Dave Gettleman, I think we all knew he was a moron, and he's just one of those guys that has kind of been in the league for so long that he kind of was just going to keep getting jobs until everyone started to realize that the jobs have outgrown him. So moving on.
Tell us about the Vikings.
So the Vikings, they fired their head coach, Mike Zimmer, and their GM, Rick Spielman. Both have been with the team for a decent amount of time. And it definitely felt as though, I don't know, it felt like this could almost have been done any time within the past couple of years with the way they've kind of perennially underperformed. But they've always done well enough in certain facets to kind of like, it felt like just enough where it's like, okay, some things didn't go our way. I'm sure next year we're still going to be a competitive team. That's what happens when you're when you're kind of like just under competitive year after year, where you're kind of competing for the playoffs until the last couple of weeks, or maybe you make the playoffs and you just kind of lose a game. Obviously, they went to the NFC Championship in 2017/2018. That didn't go too well. They could have won a Super Bowl in their own building. They didn't. I forget who won that game, but so they're fired, and honestly, I think it's an extremely smart decision. Something I've learned being specifically a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers, who are famous for tanking and trusting the process, is when you're a middling team year after year after year, you're never going to get anywhere with that. It's obviously a lot different in football than it is in basketball, but I do enjoy that general train of thought, which is, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing year after year after year and expecting different results. And I think it came down to the fact that they've got some good players and they just needed to try something different. Because clearly this matchup, whether it was Zimmer or Spielman, both, neither, something wasn't working. And I think the most interesting fallout of this is probably going to be what happens with Kirk Cousins. Because
he's on the last, I just looked up, he's on the last 2 years of his contract. He's an unrestricted free agent in 2023. Last year of his contract. What did I just look up?
I don't know.
Really good. I'm a really good podcaster, guys.
It's fine.
He is an unrestricted free agent in 2023. So this is the last. That's what I thought. This is the last year of his contract. So, yeah. Do you think they let him stay this year and then move on from him next year?
Yeah, I mean, he's fully guaranteed. Like, Spielman was the one who's just been fully guaranteeing Kirk Cousins year after year. Obviously, a lot goes into that. I don't think that's the wrong decision either, because I think Kirk Cousins is a very good quarterback. But I think, again, what it's going to kind of come down to is, like, eventually it doesn't matter how good Kirk Cousins is if they're not winning games and they're not going to the playoffs and they're not succeeding in the playoffs. And I think it really just comes down to, okay, how is next year going to look? And then after that, they're out of it. They don't have to pay him any more money. Does that mean they draft a guy this year? Do they draft a guy next year? Do they go after a big free agent next year or something? Like, I think with both of these guys gone, it has a lot to do with Kirk Cousins and where this team goes in the future, because they have really good young pieces. And they're going to have to pay those guys eventually. But they've also got guys toward the end of their deals like Kirk Cousins. So I think you'll probably start with seeing if they can get this team to compete right away. And if that doesn't work in year one, once you can be free of Kirk Cousins and his money, I think they're really going to take a very hard look at rebuilding around Justin Jefferson, maybe Dalvin Cook. I don't know his contract situation, but I doubt he's a running back. They don't necessarily last that long. He's already showing certain signs of wear and tear, unfortunately, but it'll just be interesting to see the direction they go with that.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook is not an unrestricted free agent until 2026.
Yeah, I mean,
6-year contract.
Again, you're probably looking at it. I'm not. When can they cut him for not a ton of money?
I honestly don't know.
All right. Well, we can come back to it, but because that's the thing that really matters, especially with running backs, because they're often signed to deals that look really big and probably aren't. They're not going to get the majority of the money.
It's about after 20. I want to say right around the 23 season is right around where that money starts to drop.
And there you go. Dan Bradley, our contract expert, in sabermetrics, is saying 2024. So yeah, that's exactly the kind of timeline that I'm talking about. Is you see what the new head coach and the new GM want to do and bring in. You try and win next year and see where that takes us. Do you want to talk a little bit?
Oh, sorry, you were on a slight delay there because we froze for a second. But so I think a big thing, like you said, Kirk Cousins' contract. I think in 2023 there is an outstanding draft class coming up, especially for quarterbacks. So at least that's the way it looks right now. We're still a little bit early to tell, but I think you want to kind of start to get this building and your ducks in a row before you're looking to draft your next next franchise quarterback, or your next key player that you're looking to have around for a long time. So I think this was the right move, and I think it's more so trying to get your ducks in a row before you need to kind of take those next steps into looking more towards the future. I've seen some of the people that they were requesting to interview for both jobs. Again, really great guys from really established franchises already. But yeah, I think, like you said, they have so much young talent that I think if we get a really good head coach behind them, that this team can be really good. Like you said, like being mediocre with the head coach and the front office that they've had right now can be difficult, and they've been mediocre. So just taking a little bit of a step up to be good can get them far.
Yeah, I agree. And next up on our list was the Broncos, who have let go their head coach, Vic Fangio. Obviously was a great defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears a few years ago, led that really, really good Bears defense. Granted, with a lot of great players, but he was the head coach for the Broncos for either 2 or 3 years. I really should have just written that down. I thought I'd remember, and I'm clearly wrong. But he was there for a couple years. They obviously, it's hard to tell how much of the blame is his, because they have a very, very solid roster, with the obvious caveat of they haven't been able to find their quarterback. They swung and missed on a few guys, including Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, who did play pretty well this year. But, I don't know. It's arguable whether or not he really played up to the full-on franchise quarterback type of level. They tried Joe Flacco a couple years back. So it's going to be really interesting which way they go with this, especially after passing on drafting a quarterback like Justin Fields, Mac Jones last year. Them and the Panthers both. It's still kind of confusing as to why they did that. Obviously, they got a good player in their cornerback, but they're starting to look at guys, and I think we kind of see this a lot, but they're starting to look at guys kind of different from Vic Fangio, with the exception for the most part of Dan Quinn, who's another defensive guy with the Cowboys. Is probably up for assistant coach of the year with the way that he transformed that defense. But I wouldn't be shocked to see them go the kind of more seasoned offensive guy, or even the young gun offensive guy like Kellen Moore. I feel like I get his name wrong all the time, and I confuse him with another former player. But the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, I believe they're also interviewing Doug Peterson, who obviously has a bit of a track record of being able to work with those young quarterbacks. They're going to be a prime destination for guys like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson if they're looking to leave in the offseason, because again, their roster's stacked. It's a really, really good roster with a lot of really solid players, and they're built to win now if they can just find the right guy under center.
Yep. And I think some interesting things is that you had mentioned about their quarterback situation. The GM, George Patton, said the headline says Drew Lock definitely factors into potential 2022 QB solution. Vic Fangio has had a lot of really good years, and the last few years with the Broncos haven't been great. I think he gets another job as a defensive coordinator elsewhere. He is a defensive-minded genius, like genuine genius when it comes to that. So I think he gets a job as a defensive coordinator elsewhere. I think maybe just head coach kind of wasn't his expertise. I think he can really excel as a defensive coordinator. And I think a lot of this lies in Denver's issues in front office. I think they have a decent amount of issues in their front office right now, and I'm curious to see if anything shakes up with their scouting department and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think he gets another. I think my big thing is just that I don't think we've seen the last of Vic Fangio at all.
No, he's going to get a job as a defensive coordinator on probably one of these new staffs, or he strikes me as the type of guy that someone like Doug Peterson would hire.
Yep.
Doug Peterson's first call when he got hired to be the Eagles head coach was Jim Schwartz, and he gave Jim Schwartz complete control over the defense. Jim Schwartz had head coaching experience. He had been in the league a long time. Vic Fangio is that exact kind of guy where if you hire an offensive-minded head coach, you can basically just hand the keys of the defense to him, and he's basically like a sub-head coach in that sort of way regardless. So he's going to be very sought after on the defensive side of the ball. But moving on, probably the most surprising. You
want me to do this one? You could do Chicago. This way I'll give you a break for a second.
That's fine.
The most surprising of head coach firings is that the Dolphins fired head coach Brian Flores. This one came completely out of the blue. We had known about the last several months, this entire last year, that there was a huge butting of heads between management and GM and Brian Flores. With kind of entire general outlooks, and especially a huge catalyst was the Tua Deshaun Watson rumors that flew around for the entire time up until the trade deadline. And I believe most of the reports said that Brian Flores was not interested in taking Deshaun Watson and really wanted to, back the guy they had, whereas front office and management wanted to pursue Deshaun Watson. And then he was fired. He kind of transformed a lot of that offense. That offense is now really young. They went on a 7-game win streak this year at midseason.
Started at 1-7, and then won.
And then went 7-7. Ended up going 7-7. And then I think a huge thing too is that Brian Flores started putting a lot of coordinators and coaches and advisors to advisory coaches to benefit Tua. I know they were able to get his high school coaches or his high school QB coach and the guys who helped him transition to the draft. So Brian Flores helped do that to kind of get the guys around Tua that they needed. But then he was fired, and I think he is probably the prime head coach prospect for these other teams on the list who have fired their head coaches right now. That Brian Flores is probably at the top of the list for somebody who is looking to hire a head coach.
Yeah, I mean, he went 24-18 in his final 42
Mhm.
games as a head coach. He had
How many years was he there?
he was there 3. So
3.
the
Okay.
first year was the kind of the tanking year, where even then it was, that was the tank for 2 a year.
Yep.
And even then they won more games than I think anyone expected them to. Obviously, they
Mhm.
didn't have the first overall pick, where they probably would have taken Joe Burrow. They fell down a little bit and ended up selecting Tua Tagovailoa. Sorry, my dog's off on the side just doing weird things
Eating mail.
as always. No mail yet. She's not angry enough at me yet to take my mail and go eat it somewhere else. But I mean, he overachieved, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I think he spent 3 years overachieving. It's shocking that he got fired. And I think the main thing, and the owner addressed this basically, is the relationships in the building just weren't great.
Yeah.
It really had nothing to do with his coaching. And he even said that he fully expects him to get another head coaching job. And I think that is to be expected. Obviously, he's a defensive minded guy, but I think that he was just a good general leader.
Mhm.
Obviously, the question is, we're not in that building. How bad were those relationships? Were they his fault? But also, I think an important part of this is reportedly a large part of the reason that Deshaun Watson, who has a no trade clause, wanted to go to Miami was because of Brian Flores being there. So, do the Broncos look at Brian Flores and say, okay, we can get Brian Flores, and that will make Deshaun Watson want to come here? Boom. You've got a head coach
Yeah.
that can
And a
win
quarterback.
and overachieve, and you've got your quarterback who's young. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks surrounding him, but if you can get him on the field with that team, you're probably making the playoffs. So it'll be very interesting to see where he goes. Does he take a year off? I mean, he might go the Doug Peterson route, who a lot of people think was fired kind of unjustly, after a lot of success, but took a year off, and now he's getting basically every interview that he wants. So
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to see both who the Dolphins bring in, but then also where Brian Flores goes. So
Yeah. Do you have any idea? Do you think they go for a more offensive minded person or a more defensive minded person?
I mean, generally speaking, I think I'm always going to lean the way of offense, just with the way the NFL is kind of that's the way that the NFL has leaned in the past few years. I mean, it's an offensive minded league now more than it ever has been. But there has been an influx of defensive coaches and interviews. And, Brandon Staley obviously was having a lot of success before he ruined my life. But it'll just be interesting to see if they kind of want to go back. Brian Flores isn't a guy that I thought was a particularly he's a defensive minded guy, but I think just generally speaking, he was a good coach and a good um, manager of people. More so than I don't think he was hired specifically because of his defensive prowess, so much as just the way that he led men
Yep.
or his overall football IQ. So I don't think that that's going to deter them from going the defensive route. But I think if they want to maximize Tua, if they think that he's their guy, then I wouldn't be shocked to see them go with someone who has a lot of experience doing that with quarterbacks, maximizing them.
Yep. And as of yesterday, they had, I believe, 3 guys. I know they had Dan Quinn, who is the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, Brian Dabble, and Mike McDaniels were the 3 that they had requested to interview.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously Dan Quinn is a popular candidate. I think he's probably going to get a lot of interviews.
Where do you think if you had to choose one?
I think he stays in Dallas.
Yeah.
I don't think he goes. I
meant Brian Flores. I forgot. When you said Dan Quinn, I heard Brian Flores. Go ahead. Dan Quinn stays in Dallas. Sorry.
Yeah, I think he stays in Dallas. I think only a year removed of it from being a head coach in Atlanta. I feel like guys like Dan Quinn, especially that immediately found such success, I feel like a lot of times they tend to stay there a year or two and they wait for kind of that perfect opportunity. If he views as any of these opportunities as perfect, I mean, maybe it is that Denver Broncos job. He'll probably take it, but I kind of feel like I just get the feeling that he'll stay in Dallas. But
if you had an idea where Brian Flores goes,
I want to say the Broncos. I mean, I also
everyone to the Broncos.
I kind of feel like he takes a year off. I wouldn't be shocked to see that because I don't think his popularity is going to decrease in the next year. If anything, I think it'll increase depending on what the Dolphins look like next year. But I think if Broncos management and Brian Flores think that they can get Deshaun Watson in Denver, that wouldn't shock me. But last but not least, we have the Chicago Bears, who have finally fired Matt Nagy, and also fired their GM Ryan Pace. They've both been there a handful of years, I believe. I want to say 3. Obviously had success in the first year, making the playoffs. Maybe it's been 4. God, I really should have just looked this up beforehand. Yeah,
A little
4
bit of a
seasons,
mess
because
today.
the first season he had a lot of success with Vic Fangio as that defensive coordinator. They made the playoffs. He ends with a winning record overall as a head coach, but ends with just one losing season in 2021. I don't know. He won Coach of the Year in his first year, and then went 20-27 since. Obviously, having Mitch Trubisky for a couple years, and then this year having a rookie Justin Fields, a bench warming Nick Foles, and a QB1 season from Andy Dalton. But yeah, I mean, this was maybe the least surprising of all of them. But it's about time that they move on from Matt Nagy. Ryan Pace, I was not as sure about. I was not 100% sure that he would get fired. I think that he's done a decent amount of good things, to be honest. I think he's learned from himself, which is honestly
not something Dave Gettleman can say.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something a lot of people in the NFL can say. I think a lot of them are very full of themselves, and they think they're the smartest person in the room. I mean, Howie Roseman, I feel like, has gone through like 2 or 3 cycles of that, him being the general manager of the Eagles. But, they're starting over fresh. They have Justin Fields. And I think first and foremost, they're going to focus on maximizing Justin Fields. Like, I think the fact that they signed Matt Nagy to begin with, around the Mitch Trubisky time, I think kind of tells me their mindset completely. They have a quarterback. They have a guy that they view as a franchise quarterback. And to win in the league, you need to maximize that talent. And I think that's the best way to do it. I think that's the way they're going to approach it. I know that they've interviewed Doug Peterson, who, again, I kind of knew last year he was going to be getting a lot of these types of interviews. I think this is probably the type of place where he lands, which is a place that has a young quarterback that needs development. And if there's one thing Doug Peterson is good at, he's good with working with quarterbacks, and he's also very, very good at controlling a locker room and being a leader of men. I mean, he never lost the locker room in all of his years there. Did he lose Carson Wentz? That's to be debated. Who knows? But yeah, do you have any thoughts on the Bears situation?
I mean, what it's said about Matt Nagy has already been said, but I think the big thing for me is they chose Justin Fields. That, you know what I mean? Like, you were choosing favorites here. You were choosing a favorite child. You were choosing either Justin Fields or Matt Nagy. You have Matt Nagy stay, and you don't have Justin Fields do as good as he can. So I think they chose Justin Fields. I think it was the smart choice. I think we saw this one coming from 10 miles away. I'm not even going to say a mile away, from 10 miles away. The fact that he was still there at the beginning of this season was kind of a little bit not weird, but I think I understand why they kept him this year. But
the world knew he was on a hot seat going into the season.
Going in before the season had even started. So I think they chose Justin Fields. Like you said, I was a little bit more surprised about Ryan Pace. But I think it was kind of just they were tied together. Yeah. And I did have a list of some guys that they requested to interview. Everybody who has an open head coaching job right now has interviewed or requested to interview Dan Quinn. Doug Peterson was one of them.
Big balls.
Byron Leftwich, the Buccaneers offensive coordinator. You and I had talked about him when we did coaching hot seats. I like him for head coaching vacancy. Nathaniel Hackett, the Packers offensive coordinator. Leslie Frazier, the Bills defensive coordinator. Brian Flores, the former Dolphins coach. Matt Eberflus, the Colts defensive coordinator. And Brian Dabble, Bills OC. Oh, and Todd Bowles, Buccaneers defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, they
definitely have an extensive list. Yeah,
and that's what it should be.
I love that.
Like,
yeah.
And I like that there's also just a couple guys on there that they're not the most obvious guys. I mean, again, I'm biased, but the Eagles have had a lot of really good head coaches that weren't on anyone else's list, namely Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, and so far Nick Sirianni, the only first-year head coach to make the playoffs. So
yeah. The two that took me, I haven't seen Eberflus, the Colts defensive coordinator, on any other lists that I know
Yeah, that
of.
surprised me.
I hadn't seen him, and Leslie Frazier, the Bills defensive coordinator. Everybody's going after the Bills. Both of their coordinators are on numerous. I don't think Leslie Frazier's on another list, but their offensive coordinators on a lot of lists. So everyone's going after the Bills. Rightfully so. I understand why, but I like that they're casting a wide net, especially in a place with Justin Fields, that the Bears have a bright future. I mean, they're another team with a lot of good younger guys. They're not super aged, and I think they have a lot of talent on that team that was not being used right in the past handful of years.
I mean, if you look just on the offense, I mean, you have a young core of David Montgomery, Justin Fields, and Darnell Mooney, who really kind of stepped up and broke out this year, along with Allen Robinson, who was on
broke our hearts.
The final year thing, franchise tag. Thank you, Michael. He was on the franchise tag this year, and obviously doesn't really want to be back there, or didn't want to be back there. I'm sure that the new general manager will try and convince him otherwise, because no matter how he looked this year, he's still a talented player, and I'm sure it was due more to not wanting to be there than his talent dropping off a cliff in the way that it seemed like it did. But they have a lot of good young players, and I think it's probably, with Justin Fields being as attractive as he is, I think it's going to be an attractive job to look at.
100%. And it's a big market. Like, Chicago's I've said this before, but a good big city and a big market that is appealing to go to.
Yeah. And then finally, two that we didn't list before, which it's not recent. Obviously, the Jaguars have fired Urban Meyer. As of right now, they have not fired their GM in Trent Baalke, and the Raiders obviously fired John Gruden, and currently their interim head coach is going to be in the playoffs. So we don't really necessarily know what the Raiders are going to be doing, because they're focused on other things, like ruining my hopes and dreams. But Jacksonville is going to be very interesting. There's been a lot of talk that coaches don't want to go there with Trent Baalke there, which is completely understandable. Obviously, their fans were more interested in protesting against Trent Baalke by wearing clown masks to their final home game than they were in actually caring about beating
mustaches,
the
right?
A lot of stuff. It was very fun to watch. It was very Philadelphia of them. I kind of loved it.
Yes, very.
But it'll be interesting to see. It seems like Trent Baalke's there to stay. How does that limit their their head coaching hires? I think they are 100% the most likely, and I'm going to keep saying this, but to go with a guy like Doug Peterson, a guy who can build a winning culture there and be a leader of men in the locker room and work with a young quarterback, because Trevor Lawrence, look, maybe he's not a generational first overall pick, but God, he's not that bad. He's not as bad as we saw him in, I think, like basically 15 of their 17 games. Week 1 and week 18, you look great. And I don't think you look that bad against the Bengals
Flashes of
either.
greatness.
Very few comparatively to what we were hoping for, but I don't think he's that bad. I think Urban Meyer's that bad. So I think they're a very likely team. I know I think they've already interviewed Doug Peterson, but I think guys like that is who they're going to be looking at, and it's exactly who they should be looking at, because I don't know, they're kind of a mess of an organization and they need stability.
And that's a huge place. We talk a lot about the word culture for the NFL, and the Jacksonville is a huge place where there is a huge need for a culture shift. And Joe Judge loved that word, but huge need for a culture shift in Jacksonville.
Joe Judge sucks.
Do you want to send us off out of this segment, letting us know one more time, maybe one of the last times, so we can keep it on our counter?
He's a moronic piece of crap that will spend all day talking about building a winning culture and all this crap about, holding people accountable, and then does none of it. But we'll keep talking. Like, literally, I saw like some clips of him talking to the press over the past couple years, and it is hilarious. The things he's saying, it's ridiculous. And then, no, I will never forgive him for being the biggest moron, idiot, stupid head in the world for the way that he handled the fact that the Eagles were apparently the reason that their 6-win team didn't go to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Dude, if you wanted to go to the playoffs, win more than 6 games. Don't blame the Eagles. We won 4 games. You suck. You're terrible at your job, and I'm glad you're fired. There. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, good. I'm glad. That will be the last time. Do you want to say the famous words? Say, I hate Joe Judge one more time.
I hate Joe Judge.
There we go. The last word. We've kept a counter all year. And famous last words. But let's jump in for the final few minutes of this podcast. What?
Am I dying?
No, what did I say? Like final words on that subject.
Famous
like
last
final...
words.
Oh, like I meant to say famous
dies.
words. Your famous words. Your famous words is what I meant to say.
Okay.
But for the last few minutes, let's jump into the playoff picture. Our playoffs, our matchups, our betting lines, everything is all set for us. We have football games on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Do we want to go through the matchups first and then talk about them a little bit, or we want to go one by one?
Let's just go one by one. Start with the Titans and the fact that they have a bye somehow.
Yep. Yeah. With all the injuries they had, props to them.
I just I don't know how they're a good team. I don't get it. I've never watched them and been like, wow, what a number 1 seed kind of team. Never, literally never. I don't get it. I truly don't get it, but moving on.
Yep. Our first matchup is the number 2 seed Chiefs versus the number 7 seed Steelers. Big Ben gets to play again. This game is on Sunday at 8:15 on NBC. The Chiefs are minus 12.5, so they're 12.5 point favorites, and the over-under in this game is 46.
Okay, so real quick question. What kind of insane person shortens the Chiefs to CHI?
I didn't notice because I was spelling them out at first.
Chiefs.
So then I was... Come on, that's how I have Chicago everywhere else. But
because it's Chicago. That's what it's supposed to be.
I had spelled out the names first, and then it was going into a second line, so I shortened them, and I forgot to I must have deleted half of it and forgot to retype. So
okay,
I saw you make that face, and I knew what you were gonna say.
Well, yeah, because you're an insane person.
Yeah. I don't usually do that. You've seen our injury report. It always says KCC.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's just KC though.
But I use 3 letters for all of them.
You're an insane person. But the Kansas City Chiefs, or CHI, are favored by 12.5 points, and the over-under is 46. Honestly, I forget if you already said that because I was so distracted by the way that you wrote Chiefs. Okay, well, I'm angry that I have to watch Big Ben play again. I mean, the Chiefs should just blow them out.
100%.
The Steelers have a good defense. Najee Harris is good at football. Deontay Johnson can sometimes catch the ball.
Najee Harris did get hurt in the last game. I don't know why I didn't have that on my injury report, but he was in and out.
He came back in once basically they looked at the scoreboard and the Colts were losing, and the Steelers were like, holy crap, we can actually make the playoffs. Yep. The Colts are actually losing to the Jaguars. So I think he's fine. I'm not too worried about that because I think the same thing happened with Deontay Johnson. But I mean, Patrick Mahomes versus Big Ben. Big Ben can't throw past 10 yards without basically throwing at his back at this point.
When I was home for Christmas, I was sitting down watching watching football with my dad, and he doesn't watch. He watches every Giants game, but he doesn't watch as much of the general NFL. And the Steelers game was on Red Zone or something, and I was like, "You have to watch, genuinely look at it. Watch Big Ben play. He cannot move. He doesn't even step back to throw. He is just there. He has bricks in his feet. He genuinely does not move and can't throw. I think the Chiefs are going to run all over the Steelers this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best hope the Steelers have is to be able to run the ball well with Najee Harris and just keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands. I mean, that's what they got to be hoping to do. But I don't think either of us are predicting an upset there. Next up is this is a Saturday night game at 8:15 on CBS. It is the number 3 seed Bills versus the 6 seed Patriots. This will be the third time we see this matchup this year. Buffalo is a 4-point favorite currently. The over/under is the lowest of the week at 44.
Yeah, I think the first matchup, that game where Mac Jones only threw like 4 times, had 100% completion percentage through most of his one completion through most of the game, was really low scoring, and I think that kind of lowered the over under of this game a lot.
Yeah, I mean that, and I think just generally how the Patriots tend to play
Yep.
and win games. I mean, when they do
Mhm.
win, I mean, obviously, yeah, they put up 50 points a couple weeks ago, but
Yep.
against really good opponents, their method of winning is typically playing really good defense and
Yep.
having Mac Jones manage the game with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson being able to run the ball well.
Yes.
And the
Eat
Bills
up a lot of
defense,
clock.
yeah, the Bills defense has not been good against the run as of late.
No.
And I think that kind of plays into the Patriots' hands. So I think this will be and apparently it's also supposed to be ridiculously cold. Our weather expert,
Mhm.
also Dan Bradley at AWL
Yes.
Sabermetrics, is telling us. I should have gone with like an earpiece thing, as if I have a weatherman on standby. But yeah, I mean, I think this will just kind of look like what we expect an AFC East game in January to look like.
Oh, wow. It really is. I knew it was supposed to be that cold, but I never actually pulled up the Buffalo weather. It is a high of 10 and a low of 4.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah.
I don't like it when my weather is lower than my
It was actually
age.
4 degrees here yesterday.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like 19 when I wake up. But yeah, I mean, I don't, if I'm gonna pick an upset this week, I think that's one of my favorites is the Patriots because there's just something about Bill Belichick and the Bills. Like if I'm the Bills, I would have rather played basically anyone except the Patriots because
Yep.
they've shown that they can beat them this year already. I think they match up really well against the Bills. And they have a defense that's good enough to be able to stop Josh Allen. And the offense hasn't looked particularly good in this last month of the season anyway. So I don't know. How are you feeling about this matchup?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. If I would have to pick an upset, I think my big one is the Patriots Bills. I think the other one's like Rams Cardinals, but that's going to be a lot closer. It's 4 and 5 seed. For 3 and 6 seed, I think the Patriots have a really good chance here. Like you said, I think the big thing for them is just going to be able to manage this game and not let Josh Allen do what he does best. The Patriots defense has been playing really well, whereas the Bills haven't. So I think my pick is probably the Patriots to win this game. I which stinks because I had a future bet on the Bills before the season started, but I like that Patriots team. I think I can eat the bet. It was a small bet, so it was really not that big of a deal. But
I would never
yeah.
eat a bet if I were you. I don't think
Why?
they digest well. I'm a closeted Bills fan, so I'm not going to pick against the
Yeah,
Bills. I love the
I know you
Bills.
are.
I hope they win because I don't like seeing their fans sad. But last in the AFC.
Wait, hold on, freeze on that. Did you know? I feel I want the Bills to win because they did on Thanksgiving they showed a Josh Allen interview thing and they named a wing of the hospital after his grandma and that thing about the kids and everything and then somebody tweeted about it. It was like it genuinely made me cry I was crying on Thanksgiving about this interview and everything. And somebody tweeted at me and was like, "Oh, now I can't stop thinking about those kids being sad every time the Bills lose a game." And I was like, why would you say that? So
Well, there it
now
is. The Bills have to win for the
I
children.
know.
If the Patriots win, they're punishing
Hate kids.
like sick kids. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's on you, Bill. It's on you, Bill Belichick.
Seriously.
But last but not least in the AFC, we have the 4 seed Bengals versus the 5 seed Raiders, who snuck into the playoffs. After making me sad. Against no wait, I already said that. On Saturday at 4:35 on NBC. Cincy is 5.5 point favorites with an over under of 48.5. I mean, the Raiders have made a lot of noise this season when I never expect them to. Good for them, I guess, for being in the playoffs. I think that the collective universe will punish them for not giving me what I want. I assume as the main character of this show, that is my life. But I don't know. The Bengals ended on a hot streak. Joe Burrow looked like, a man possessed in that final month of the season. Jamar Chase was ridiculous. T. Higgins is going at full throttle. They're healthy. Their defense was actually pretty good throughout the latter half of the season. I think the Bengals are going to be a very popular kind of like sleeper pick and honeymoon type pick to make the Super Bowl. Because they're not going to be favored really in many games outside of this one, but they're popular with a young quarterback. And for a while in the past bunch of years, we had second-year quarterbacks making and possibly winning the Super Bowl. Obviously, it would have been Carson Wentz, and the year after that was Lamar Jackson, I think. Year before that was Mahomes, maybe. I don't know. I'm forgetting, but it was in my head somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to choose the Bengals. I think they might cover because the Raiders' defense is not particularly good. And I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with what has looked like a very high-powered offense as of late.
Yeah, I am picking the Bengals all the way on this. I do like that the over 48.5. I do like that. But yeah, I don't have much to say except for the fact that Bengals offense is absolutely nasty. I wouldn't want to face Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow in the playoffs, not even in the slightest. So I am a huge Bengals fan this playoff season because I would love to see the Bengals do really well in the postseason.
Yeah, they really strike me as the team that I think nobody wants to play.
Yes.
Because I think their
Actually,
ability to be
I know
physical.
a couple people around here for Patriots fans, they were almost going to get a Bengals matchup and they kind of liked it because they didn't want to play the Bills or something. I don't know. But
I mean, I would
play.
never choose a divisional matchup because I
Yeah.
think, and I've said it before, I think divisional matchups just get wonky. Like they get weird. And
Yep.
the better team is not guaranteed to win. I mean, you had the Patriots losing to the Dolphins in the final week.
Yep.
Stuff like that happens seemingly all the time when it comes to division games.
But I would not want to play the Bengals.
No, I agree. Moving on to the NFC, we have the Packers who have a bye. Obviously, they had it wrapped up last week. Played a little bit of their starters in Week 18 and then kind of sat them. But first up, we have the number 2 seed Buccaneers against the hosting the number 7 seed Philadelphia Eagles. Sunday at 1:05 on Fox. Tampa Bay is currently 8.5-point favorite. Which has gone up drastically since the line was first posted, with a lot of people betting the Tampa Bay side. I want to say they started at like 6-point favorites with an over-under of 46, which is tied for the second lowest.
No, that's second lowest. I thought you said tied for lowest.
I know math. Yeah, probably largely in part due to the way that the Philadelphia Eagles like to play football, which is run the ball. Yeah, I mean, so I had a friend of mine who was listening to our first pod the other day, and he was talking about how I didn't want the Eagles to try and make the playoffs, and I just wanted really them to show signs of life as a franchise. And obviously we were discussing that and just kind of talking about like was I rooting against the Eagles, that kind of stuff, and I think really in the latter half of the season I kind of got what I wanted. I just wanted to see something out of this team, and it didn't need to be a playoff matchup, but the fact that it turned out to be one just goes to show what this team is capable of, with Jalen Hurts kind of looking better seemingly every week as a passer, getting healthy and being able to run the ball again. Nick Sirianni finding an actual what am I trying to say, what's that thing that you have? It's like, God dang it. Oh my God, it's on the tip of my tongue. This is awful podcasting, but it's really pissing me off. It's the thing where you exist and it's like, this is my outfit and it represents who I am as a person, but it's also what I do. An identity.
There we
Nick
go.
Sirianni found an identity on his offense, and Jonathan Gannon decided to do anything other than what he was doing on defense. And honestly, I think if I'm betting any of them, this is probably the one where I'm actually betting the underdog. Partly because you know what they say about underdogs.
Underdogs are hungry dogs, and hungry dogs run faster.
Yeah, there we go. We got there. but also just because, I mean, 8.5 is a massive line, and the Buccaneers are not healthy. And they haven't looked, I mean, they looked good in week 18, but they've been slower to start. They haven't looked overly dominant. And the last time these two teams did play this season, the Buccaneers won by, I think, about a score, but it wasn't really even that close.
Right.
But the biggest matchup, I think, that is in the Eagles' favor is the fact that Darius Slay, who's had a Pro Bowl season, was able to hold Mike Evans, the last remaining receiver on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to, I think, 2 catches for 27 yards. So if he can do that all day, or even just the majority of the day against this Buccaneers team on Sunday, then that puts a lot on the running game and a lot on these young wide receivers that Tom Brady's going to be throwing to. If you're able to disrupt Tom Brady, you can beat them in the playoffs. I mean, the Giants have shown that for years. The Eagles showed it in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. It's going to be an interesting matchup, and I think that the Eagles have a better chance than the betting makes them look out to be.
I agree. The Bucks won by 6 in the last matchup.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, a possession, but it was very like I was on a plane, so I wasn't actually able to watch it. That was when I was flying to London. So I was just like literally refreshing every couple seconds to see the play. I don't think it was really that close for the majority of the game. The Eagles just did the thing that they did for a while in the beginning of the season where they scored like 20 points in the fourth quarter. But yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be very interesting. I think this is Jalen Hurts' chance to kind of just like cement himself as the quarterback for next season and possibly going forward. I think this is Nick Sirianni. I don't even want Nick Sirianni to do anything special. Just playoff experience is great for these young guys, this young coach. But honestly, just get there and don't change anything. Just do what you've been doing, play your game, stick to your identity, don't try and do anything weird, and you have a chance of beating the Buccaneers. And honestly, we've seen what it's like when Tom Brady plays the Eagles in the playoffs, and it doesn't go well for him.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that he still thinks about every night when he goes to sleep. Oh, did they beat Tom Brady in that game? Oh yeah, Super Bowl 52. Anyway.
For me, I think the Eagles do have a good chance of, I don't want to say a great chance, but I think they have a chance here. I think it's really going to come down to exploiting those Buccaneers injuries. They putting Devontae Smith in good matchups. I know that the Buccaneers cornerback room has been super beaten up. So putting Devontae Smith in, trying to exploit some matchups to get Devontae Smith down the field, trying to just kind of extend the field, I think, is the Eagles' best bet. And, you talked a little bit about your defensive coordinator. I think he is going to be a huge factor in if the Eagles have a chance of winning. And he stepped up a lot in the past few weeks, and I do think that the Eagles really do have a chance. It wasn't as crazy as you made it seem with the quarter-by-quarter breakdown. The Eagles scored 7 in the first, 7 in the third, and 8 in the fourth. And the Bucks did 14 in the first, 7, 7, 0.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is if Jonathan Gannon plays a conservative game on defense, then I don't think they're going to win. They have to get after Tom Brady. They have to make him beat them, as scary as that is. But, like, if they can get in his face and rattle him early, then that's how you win the game. That and you keep him off the field by running the ball effectively. But nobody wants to hear any more about the Eagles except me. So I could go for another 5 hours, but nobody wants that. Unfortunately, next we have to talk about the Cowboys. They are the number 3 seed hosting the 6 seed 49ers Sunday at 4:40 on CBS. Dallas is the smallest favorite of any of the favorites this week, but also at -3, and the over-under is the largest of the week at 51. Yeah, I mean, I said earlier that the Patriots were one of my favorite underdog bets, at least just to outright win. And I think the Niners are my other one, mainly because Dallas has not shown us that they can succeed in the playoffs in the past 20-some years. I don't have a lot of hope in them as an organization, really. I mean, they slowed down a little bit toward the end of the season. Dak Prescott never really, in my opinion, he never looked like he was back to himself. Yeah, I know they put up 50 on the Eagles. The Eagles also had their backup defense playing, so congrats. Also, shout out Jaquan Hardy. Yeah, love Jaquan Hardy. But he scored the 50 burger.
I saw a tweet today that said oh my God, what? I need to get the exact thing. So it was something about, hold on, let me grab the exact thing because I'm going to say it wrong. Keep going. Sorry, I interrupted you and I don't
No,
have
you're
it
fine.
pulled up. I thought it was pulled up.
But
Oh, I
yeah,
found it.
okay.
Why are Cowboy fans super easy to date?
Oh, Lord.
I
Why?
was going to say why. Because they don't expect a ring.
That's
I
I disagree with that. I think
was
they do
crazy.
expect the ring. They're just, I don't want to be too mean because it's
Yeah.
not Joe Judge. There could be people listening that are actually Cowboys fans. I
Yeah.
think they're just delusional.
Yeah.
And I think they would rather just stare at their mother's ring that their father gave their mother
Mhm.
rather than focus on getting one themselves.
And then talk about it all the time.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, beside the
America's
point.
ring.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys, they're a really good team. Their defense has been outstanding this season. This is by no means going to be an easy win for the Cowboys, though. The 49ers caught fire near the end of the season. Maybe not necessarily, but they've been up and down all season, and Jimmy Garoppolo looked really great in that end of game stretch to make the playoffs against the Rams, to beat a very good team in the Rams. And I think the 49ers are a very physical team that kind of similar to the Eagles in the way they want to win games, that they're not going to make any game an easy game for the opposite team.
Yep.
And I think they showed that against the Rams last week. So I think I think the bettors have it right when Dallas is the smallest favorite of the week. So
I completely agree. And the Garoppolo Debo Samuel connection has been
Deep is
really great.
ridiculous.
Debo is ridiculous. Trayvon Diggs is very good at interceptions, but he actually gives up a lot of yards. So I'm sure that
Most in the NFL.
yeah,
Could be wrong about that.
a lot, very high. So I believe that Trayvon Diggs is going to be covering Debo, and that, I mean, that at least gets them the yards, and then they have other weapons they can use in the red zone. But yeah, I think the 49ers are going to give them an absolute run for their money, and my pick is probably the Niners to win.
Yeah.
That may just be from my own fandom, like not wanting the Cowboys to win, that I'm a little bit skewed, but I think that the 49ers really do have what it takes to beat the Cowboys.
Yeah, the Cowboys defense, to me, they've been incredible all season, and
Yep.
Micah Parsons is probably going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year and
I
is in the
think
conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. TJ Watt will win Defensive Player of the Year.
But I think Micah Parsons is the key to the Cowboys' success.
Yes. But that being said, they also strike me as the type of defense that I don't know if it'll translate to playoff football. I really don't.
It's different.
It
Very
is.
different.
And I mean, we've seen it plenty of times where a really good defense from the regular season, the bad plays that compound over an entire season can kind of be made up for because it's over 18 weeks. But in a one-game playoff, which is what the NFL is, obviously, I don't know if the Cowboys are really the defense that's going to win you the game like they were able to during the regular season. And on top of that, I just think the Niners are one of the worst matchups for them in their ability to be very physical. That being said, the last matchup of the week is the number 4 seeded Rams versus the 5 seed Cardinals. Their fall from grace, unfortunate, dealing with injuries over the latter half of the season. But they play on the very first Monday night wild card playoff game, Monday at 8:15 on ESPN. The Rams.
I believe that's a wild card.
I know. The Rams are 4-point favorites, and the over-under is the second highest of the week at 49.5. It's a division game. The Cardinals have seemingly been better on the road this year, so maybe this is what they need.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm still picking the Rams. I do like that over-under a lot. Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much crazy stuff to say. I think this game is going to be probably the most unpredictable out of all of them. I think that, I don't know. Like I said, I picked the Rams. I think that they're in much better shape than the Cardinals are currently. And I think that they kind of have the Cardinals number a little bit, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, I think you're right. Obviously, the Cardinals did win in, I think it was week 4, but the Rams were able to beat the Cardinals the second time around, 30-23.
Yeah.
Cardinals were a much different team in the first half of the year, is what it feels like. So I don't know. I loved the Cardinals. I thought they were a really good team. I really enjoyed rooting for them. But I think the person it really comes down to is Matthew Stafford. I think the Cardinals
Yes.
are going to do everything they can to score points on this Rams team. And I think if Matt Stafford makes mistakes like he was making in the last couple weeks of this season, I think the Cardinals stand a really, really good chance. If Matt Stafford can play a mistake-free game of football and not lead the postseason in pick sixes like he did the regular season, there's a chance, and the Rams could blow them out. They've got Cooper Kupp. They have Sony Michel, who's come on as of late.
Yep. Cam
Odell
Akers
Beckham
is
Jr.
on the team again.
Yeah. So I again, but it's also a divisional game. Those can tend to get wonky. I could see this being an absolute shootout. I also won't be shocked if it's like a 10-3 win.
Low scoring. Yep.
Because weird things happen.
Yep.
But I'm going to take the Rams too. I think being at home helps. And I just think they're a healthier team right now than the Cardinals, who just haven't really been themselves lately.
No. And like even the players individually haven't really been themselves. Like DeAndre Hopkins didn't kind of put up. Yeah, I know. And hasn't put up, even in the games where, he's back, hasn't put up his usual numbers. So I think that I just think that it's really going to come down to health. And the Cardinals lost their momentum, and the Rams have all the momentum on their side.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, going into the playoffs in the NFL, maybe more than any other sport, momentum is a very large part of the equation. Yep. And I mean, you've seen it before where a team can get hot in the playoffs, and that's all that matters. And I don't know if the Cardinals are going to be able to really capture what they had earlier in the season to be able to make a playoff run. So
I completely agree. I did say one thing this week on my Twitter that said, if this past week of football was any indication for what we have in store for playoffs, it is going to be absolutely insane. And once we get these matchups done and throw the Packers and the Titans into the mix and actually have to talk about what they're going to bring to the table, I think it's going to be actually crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot us fun. I'm excited. But that brings us to the end of the playoff discussion and to the end of our podcast.
Tell us where everybody can find you, Duncan.
Same place as last week, at MPDuncan75 on Twitter. I am the producer for the Undrafted podcast, hosted by at Dino Game Theory, Jax Falcone, where we talk Dynasty Fantasy Football. You can find me doing stuff with the Undroppables at theundroppables.com and at the Undroppables on Twitter. And then you can find me here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. and the next morning on wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yep. And you can find me on Twitter at Ashley_Marie with 2 A's in Ashley. All of my content is with the Undroppables. I have a couple articles up on their page. I run their TikTok account at the Undroppables. Best place to always find me is on Twitter. And like Duncan said, you can find me here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time live. On YouTube, we have the video broadcasts that stay up, and then on every streaming platform for the recorded version. And I'm super excited to bring this podcast into playoffs. I know we had originally told you guys last week we were supposed to have a guest on. We had to postpone that interview, unfortunately. But I promise we will have that guest on at some time in the near future. We have a couple other guests hopefully coming on in the off season. That's something we started talking about. So I'm really happy to have all of you guys along for the ride. We appreciate all the support. Make sure to head over to Apple Podcasts, give this podcast a 5-star rating and a good review if you enjoyed your time with us today. If you didn't, you don't have to go over and give it a review. It's totally fine. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We appreciate all your support always. And I know we mentioned earlier that we have our Patreon league. If you would like to join the Patreon, head over, I believe it's on the Undroppables website, or if you search on Patreon, it is the Undroppables. And you can join our Discord channel with our entire team. You can come chat with Duncan and I in Discord and get access to a lot of our content before it comes out and just get to talk shop with us. So sign up for Patreon to come hang out with us.
Awesome. Ashley, I will see you next week after hopefully a fun week of playoff football, and all of our viewers, we will see you next week at the same time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Bye, guys.